The wind howled like a wounded beast. Snow hit the ground hard, covering the rocky path in thick white sheets. The cold cut through everything: trees, metal, skin. Even the air felt frozen. But still, the man walked. His name was Jack. He was human. And he was alone on this planet, sent here to repair a broken weather station deep in the mountain range. It was supposed to be an easy job, but the storm had come too early, and it had come fast. Jack pulled his coat tighter and kept walking. Every step felt heavier. His boots sank deep into the snow. His breath turned into clouds. Then, he stopped. He heard something, a sound. Soft, weak, a cry. Jack turned his head. He wasn't sure if it was the wind playing tricks, but then he heard it again, faint, like a baby animal. It wasn't a language, just crying. He moved toward the sound, off the trail and into the forest of ice-covered trees. His boots cracked through frozen bushes. The trees here were sharp and twisted like broken bones. Still, the cry continued, closer now, sad, helpless. Then, he saw it, a tiny shape curled up near a fallen log half covered in snow. Jack rushed forward and dropped to his knees. His heart jumped. It was not human. It was a child, but not from Earth. Its skin was pale blue, almost glowing. Its eyes were large and its fingers had more joints than his. It wore no coat, only a thin, torn cloth. Its lips were purple from the cold. Ice had formed in its hair, and it was crying. Jack didn't stop to think. He unzipped his own coat, wrapped the child inside, and held it close to his chest. The little alien gasped as warmth touched its skin. Its small arms gripped his shirt, desperate for heat. Its head rested against him, eyes still wet with tears. "You're safe now," Jack whispered, though he knew the child didn't understand. He looked around. No one was in sight. No other footsteps, just snow. Endless snow. "Where is your family?" Jack asked softly. The child shivered but said nothing. Its eyes were filled with fear and trust. Jack stood, still holding the child tight. He had to find shelter. He couldn't go back to the weather station. It was too far. But maybe he could follow the tracks back. Maybe someone else was nearby. He looked down. There were faint footprints in the snow, smaller ones going back toward the forest. But something else caught his eye too. Red, tiny drops of blood, frozen into the snow. His stomach turned. Someone was hurt, he whispered. Jack began walking, carefully following the trail of small prints and blood. His arms ached, but he didn't let go of the child. The little alien had stopped crying, now eyes closed, breathing shallow but steady. Trees closed in around him. The wind got worse. The sky grew darker. Suddenly he saw something ahead, a hand, sticking out from behind a pile of snow. Jack hurried forward and found the rest of the body. A woman, an alien woman. She was lying on her side, one arm reaching out as if calling for help. Her skin was the same pale blue as the child's, but her body was stiff, frozen. Jack knelt beside her and checked her face. Her lips were cracked, her cheeks were covered in frost, but she blinked. She was still alive. "Hey, stay with me," Jack said, tapping her cheek. Her eyes opened slowly. She stared at him, confused, scared. Then she looked down and saw the child in his arms. A sound escaped her throat, a weak gasp, a sob. She tried to speak, but her voice was broken. She reached out a trembling hand toward her child, but it fell back before it could touch. Jack placed the child beside her. The alien woman pulled it close, wrapping her arms around it weakly, as if afraid someone would take the child away. The sight made Jack's chest tighten. They had almost died, alone in the storm. He looked around. They couldn't stay here. If the storm grew stronger, they would freeze for sure. He had to do something. He pulled out his emergency thermal blanket and wrapped it around them both. Then he built a small fire using his portable igniter and branches from the forest floor. The flame flickered, weak against the wind, but it was something. The woman stared at him again, no words, just eyes that had only seen fear before. Now for the first time, saw kindness. Snowflakes kept falling like silent ashes. Jack sat near the weak fire, watching the alien mother hold her child close. The flames danced, but the wind threatened to kill them at any second. He added more, dry twigs and branches, but they wouldn't last long. The mother was breathing, but barely. Her skin was pale and her eyes kept closing as if she was losing the fight to stay awake. The child in her arms had stopped crying, now only sleeping against her chest. Jack knew this small warmth wouldn't save them for long. He had to move. He had to find real shelter. He stood up, scanned the area, and spotted something strange. Broken necklace in the snow. It was alien, made of dark stone and wire. But it was still warm. Someone else had passed this way. Recently. Jack looked further into the woods. The snow was deep, but a faint trail showed up under it. 2 sets of prints, one small, one larger. They weren't fresh, but they were clear. And between them, every few steps, drops of blood, fresh, dark, sharp against the white. Jack stared at the wounded trees around him. Something had passed through, in pain and in a hurry. He followed the trail a few steps. The prints twisted as if whoever it was had stumbled. A dragged heel, a deep footfall. Then, nothing. The tracks just ended. Jack turned back to the mother and child. The fire was already shrinking, the heat fading. He knelt beside them. "I need to find better shelter," he whispered. "I'll carry you both." The mother didn't answer, but her eyes blinked slowly. She understood. She nodded. Jack lifted, the child first, wrapping it inside his jacket again. Then, with effort, he picked up the mother. She was cold, but her heart still beat. Weak, but there. The snow hit his face like knives as he moved forward. Each step was slow. He had no path, just broken signs, memories, and the hope that someone had once walked this way and survived. He kept going. Minutes passed. Then, he saw something in the distance, a shadow in the snow, low to the ground, covered in white. Could have been a rock, or a broken tree. But Jack felt it in his bones. It was something more. He moved closer, carefully. It was a door, half buried, metallic, old, rusted shut, a forgotten shelter pod maybe, from some lost mission or maybe alien tech abandoned long ago. Jack dropped to his knees and brushed away the snow. The door had symbols, not human, but that didn't matter. It had a handle. He pulled. It didn't move. He pulled again, harder this time. Metal screeched. Then, click. The door cracked open, just enough. Jack pushed it wider with his shoulder, grunting. His hands were numb. His eyes stung from the wind. He peeked inside. Darkness, but dry. Jack smiled. He stepped inside and gently placed the mother and child on the cold metal floor. The space was tight, barely room for 3 people, but it was enough. No snow, no wind, just silence. He lit a small light from his pack. The walls were scratched. The air smelled old, but there was a control panel on the wall. He touched it. A weak hum answered. The old alien tech was still alive, barely. The mother groaned. Jack turned to her. Her lips moved slowly. "Karshena," she whispered. Jack didn't know the word, but her hand reached toward the child and then touched her own heart. Was it a prayer? A name or a goodbye? "No," Jack whispered, shaking his head. "You're not dying. Not after all this." He took out his emergency food pack and opened it. He held it to her lips. She didn't eat at first, but after a few seconds, she sipped, swallowed. Then a second sip, a third. Color slowly returned to her face. The child, still in sleep, let out a soft breath and cuddled closer to her chest. Jack finally sat down beside them. His muscles ached. His hands were red from the cold. But they were alive. Outside, the storm roared, but inside, there was silence, warmth, life. The mother looked at him again. Her eyes were not afraid anymore. They were full of something else. Something Jack hadn't seen from an alien before. Trust. The shelter pod groaned in the wind, but it held strong. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, the world was still. Jack watched the alien mother rest against the wall, her child curled safely in her arms. The old metal room was cold but not deadly. It had saved their lives. He crouched near the panel again. A flicker of power still hummed from it. Not enough to heat the space, not enough to call for help, but enough to light the small corner with a soft glow. Jack sat down and leaned against the opposite wall. He was exhausted. The mother opened her eyes slowly. She looked at him, not like a stranger anymore, but like someone she was trying to understand. Her lips moved. A word escaped. Rough. Strange. Jack didn't understand, but he leaned forward. She said it again, then touched her chest. Velna. Jack pointed at her gently. Velna. She nodded, weak but clear. Jack smiled. That's your name? Another slow nod. She then looked at the child sleeping in her arms. She brushed the small one's hair, then looked back at Jack. Rael. Jack pointed to the child. Rael? Velna smiled faintly. Her voice cracked, but the word held warmth. Jack tapped his chest. Jack? Velna watched him carefully, then repeated, Jacques. Her voice struggled with the sound, but her eyes held no fear now, only curiosity. There was silence for a while, not awkward, but heavy with things unsaid. Velna finally looked away and stared at the ceiling. Jack followed her gaze. There, etched into the metal, were marks, claw marks, old ones, deep ones. Something had once tried to break into this shelter. He stood and moved closer to inspect the walls. There were scratches on the outside hatch too. Something strong, something big. Velna's voice shook behind him. Caractol, she whispered. Jack turned. What's that? She made a clawing motion with her fingers, then raised her hand to show teeth. Her eyes went wide. Jack understood. A predator, one that lived in this storm. He remembered the distant howls the night before. Now they felt closer. He moved to the door, sealed it tighter, and placed a metal pipe across the handle. We're not going out again, he said. Not until this storm is done. Velna said nothing, but her head slowly nodded. Jack brought out another food pack. He offered it to her. She hesitated. Then she broke the pack in two and offered half back to him. Jack blinked. He didn't expect that. Most aliens he'd met before looked at humans with fear or hate. They never shared, never trusted. But Velna, she shared. He took the food gently. Thank you, he said. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the way he said them. After eating, the child stirred. Rael opened his eyes, looked around, and let out a tiny sound. A mix between a coo and a chirp. Velna touched her child's face gently, tears filling her eyes. She hadn't expected to see her child alive. She whispered something to him. Soft, musical words. Jack watched quietly. Velna noticed him staring. She looked down shyly, as if embarrassed. You don't have to hide that, Jack said gently. He pulled out a small object from his pocket, a plastic model of a bird from Earth. He had brought it for good luck. It was painted red and gold. He placed it near Rael. Teo. Little alien child grabbed it immediately. His fingers were small but quick. He giggled. Velna looked shocked. Her child hadn't laughed in days. She touched the bird gently. Jack smiled. It's yours now. Velna nodded slowly, then whispered something again. Jack heard one word clearly this time. Compasha. It was close to compassion. He didn't know her language, but he knew what she meant. He nodded. Yeah, he whispered. Compassion. They sat in silence again. But now it was different. Not fear, not pain, but peace. Outside, the storm was still raging, but inside, trust had begun to grow, between a human and an alien mother who once believed humans had no heart. She had never seen kindness before. Until now. The night was colder than before. Jack sat by the sealed shelter door, his back against the frozen metal. He held a sharpened metal rod in his hand, his only real weapon. The storm outside had begun to calm, but something worse was coming. He could feel it. Velna sat in the corner, her arms wrapped tightly around her child Rael. She rocked him gently, whispering soft words in her alien tongue. Her eyes no longer showed panic, but they were not at peace either. Jack glanced at her. She hadn't slept in hours. Neither had he. There had been no sound for a long time. Then, a low growl. It was far, but real. Jack stiffened. He stood up, slowly, careful not to wake Rael. He moved to the metal hatch and pressed his ear against it. Nothing. But then, another growl. Louder this time. Closer. Velna's head snapped up. Her skin turned paler. Her lips trembled. She spoke one word. Caractol. Jack remembered it from before. The predator. He stepped back from the door. Another growl. Right outside now. Heavy breathing. A snarl. Then, a deep thud against the shelter wall. Rael woke with a cry. Velna covered his mouth, tears in her eyes. Jack moved between them and the door. Outside, the creature growled again. It circled the pod, sniffing, scraping its claws against the metal. Scratch. A long line appeared in the wall as its claws dragged across. Jack gripped his weapon tighter. It knows we're in here. Velna hugged Rael tighter. Her lips moved in silent prayer. The creature stopped. Silence. Then, boom, a sudden slam against the door. The metal shook. Another slam, and another. Jack braced the door with his body, teeth clenched. Stay behind me, he shouted. Velna obeyed, shielding her child. Jack could feel the strength of the beast outside. It was no normal animal. Its weight was massive. Every slam made the hinges cry out. Suddenly, a panel on the side wall flickered. An emergency system. A small screen lit up. Old alien symbols danced across it, then translated into basic words. Motion detected nearby. Warning. Caractol confirmed. Shelter integrity low. Jack's blood ran cold. The system knew the beast, and it knew the shelter wouldn't hold. Velna rose to her knees and touched a hidden panel on the wall. It opened slightly. Inside was a metal hatch, small, barely big, enough for one person to crawl through. She looked at Jack and pointed. Go, she whispered. Take Rael. Escape. Jack shook his head. I'm not leaving you. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Please, you save child. You save life. Jack looked at the child in her arms. Rael was staring at him. Tiny, afraid, but still hopeful. Then came another deafening boom. The door dented inward. Sparks flew from the hinges. There wasn't much time. Jack ran to Velna and helped her up. We all go. She shook her head. Too slow, you go. No. Jack growled. I don't leave people behind, not anymore. Velna stared at him, stunned. No one had ever said that to her. Not from her kind, not from humans. He grabbed a second rod from his pack and handed it to her. She didn't know how to use it, but she held it tightly. Jack lifted Rael into his arms and nodded. You follow me. If we die together. Velna nodded. This time there was fire in her eyes. Crash! Part of the wall cracked open. A massive white claw pushed through. The caractol's growl shook the floor. Its face peeked in, long fangs, glowing red eyes, and a head full of jagged ice-like horns. It roared. Velna screamed. Jack threw the child through the crawl space first. Go, Rail. Then he turned and faced the beast. He shouted, banging his rod against the wall. Come on, over here. The caractol lunged toward him, but the tight space slowed it down. Velna climbed into the tunnel after Rail. Jack gave one last look at the monster. Then he jumped into the tunnel and pulled the hatch shut behind them. The tunnel was narrow, dark, and filled with dust. Jack crawled quickly, blood pounding in his ears. Behind him, he heard the shelter collapse. Metal twisted. The beast roared. But they were gone. They crawled for minutes until the tunnel opened into a rocky cave. Cold, but safe. Jack dropped to the ground, panting. Velna held Rail tightly. The child clung to her chest, crying softly. Jack looked at them, breathless, and smiled. We're alive. Velna nodded, her face full of shock and awe. She had seen something impossible, a human standing between her and death, a human risking everything to protect her child. Something inside her heart changed forever. Inside the cave, everything was silent, except for the sound of breathing, heavy, broken breathing. Jack sat against the stone wall, clutching his arm. Blood soaked his sleeve. The beast had scratched him just before he closed the hatch. He didn't scream. He didn't groan. But his face was pale, and his eyes were dim. Velna crouched beside him, shaking. Not from fear now, but from worry. She touched his wound gently. He flinched but nodded. Do it, he whispered. Whatever you can. Rail stood nearby, holding Jack's lucky red and gold bird toy tightly in his little hands, eyes wide and afraid. Velna reached into the pouch, on her waist. She had nothing left from her old life, only a tiny stone vial filled with green dust. She poured it into her palm, added drops of melted snow, and mixed it until it became a glowing paste. She pressed it against Jack's wound. He let out a hiss of pain, but soon the heat faded into cool relief. Velna whispered a word in her language, something soft, almost like stay strong. Jack closed his eyes. Thank you. Velna wrapped cloth around his arm. Her hands were gentle, careful, as if she was treating family. But this wasn't just care. This was trust returned. Time passed. The fire Jack built at the cave entrance flickered gently. Its warmth kept the cold out. But it also drew attention. Jack opened his eyes slowly. His head rested on his backpack now. Velna had made a pillow for him. Rael lay curled beside him, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. Then, a sound. Not the wind, not the storm, but footsteps. Velna stiffened immediately. Her ears twitched. She grabbed the sharp metal rod Jack had given her earlier. Jack forced himself to sit up, pain in his side. Not the beast again, he whispered. Then the shadows moved. 3 figures appeared at the mouth of the cave, tall, covered in furs and snow. Not alien, not beast. Human. Jack's eyes narrowed. He recognized one of them, Corbin. One of the men from the main base. The others had left days ago when the storm came. Jack had stayed behind to finish his mission. He hadn't expected them to return, especially not here. Corbin stepped forward, lowering his weapon. Jack? What in God's name happened? Jack pointed to Velna and Rael, both standing close behind him. I found them. They were dying in the storm. Corbin's eyes darkened. Aliens. Velna gripped the rod tightly. Her body shook. Jack stood in front of her. They're not a threat, Corbin scoffed. They always say that. First it's just a mother and kid, then it's spies, saboteurs. We don't even know what species they are. They're survivors, Jack said firmly. Like us. The other men whispered to each other, unsure. Corbin raised his voice. We're under orders not to bring unknowns back to the base. I don't care, Jack said. They come with me. Corbin stepped closer. That's not your choice. Velna. Tensed, she was ready to fight even if she didn't stand a chance. But before anyone could speak, a loud, deafening howl echoed from outside the cave. Not just one. 3. Then growls. The Caractol pack had found them. Corbin froze. What was that? Jack looked at Velna. She whispered something in her language. Her eyes met Jack's. They're coming. Jack didn't wait. He grabbed his weapon, handed Rail to Velna, and shouted at Corbin. You want to live? Help us now. The growls grew. Louder. Shadows moved outside. The fire flickered, and then the first beast leapt into the cave. It was even bigger than before. Ice covered its back like armor. Its fangs dripped with hunger. Corbin's men fired. The beast dodged, knocking one man into the wall. Jack ran forward, stabbing the rod deep into its leg. Velna screamed and swung her rod, slashing its face. Rael cried in the corner. Another beast entered. Then another. Firelight and fury filled the cave. The battle was chaos. Screams, roars, blood. But Jack didn't fall. Velna didn't run. They fought, side by side, and in the middle of it all, Rael watched as a human and his alien mother became warriors together. By the end, the beasts lay still. Corbin's men were injured but alive. Jack collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. Velna helped him stand. She looked into his eyes. This time she didn't say a word. She simply placed her forehead against his. In her culture, that was sacred. The cave smelled of smoke, blood, and wet fur. Outside, the storm had passed. The world beyond was white and cold, but silent. Too silent. Velna sat beside Rael, who clung to her leg, still shaking from the attack. Jack crouched at the cave's edge, watching the horizon. His side hurt. His bandage was soaked, but he didn't care. His eyes scanned the snowy hills for more movement. Corbin and his men sat across the cave, tending their wounds. No one spoke. Much. They had seen what the Caractol could do, and they had seen how the alien woman fought beside the human. That silence said everything. Suddenly, Velna touched Jack's arm. She pointed toward a large rock wall inside the cave. One covered in thick moss and snow. Jack followed her. She knelt down and brushed away the moss. A shape appeared. A door. Not metal. Not human-made. It was stone. But shaped with purpose. And it glowed faintly blue. Velna whispered something. Jack didn't understand, but he saw how her hands trembled as she placed them against the center. The stone reacted. It slid open. With a soft hum, a warm breath of air escaped from inside. Jack blinked. You knew this was here? Velna nodded. Old world. My people. Long ago. She stepped inside, carrying Rael. Jack followed, and Corbin limped behind them, curious. What they saw stopped them all in their tracks. The inside was massive, a hidden shelter under the earth, filled with old alien tech, strange plants glowing gently, and crystals lighting the walls like soft lanterns. There were beds made of thick, soft vines. Pools of warm water shimmered in corners. The air smelled clean, alive. Rael let out a small gasp and ran to touch one of the glowing vines. Velna fell to her knees and wept. Jack stepped beside her. What is this place? She looked up. Sanctuary. She pressed her hand to a stone orb on the wall. It glowed brighter. Machines came to life. A low hum filled the space as warm air spread through the room. Jack touched the wall. This was hidden the whole time. Corbin stepped forward. How many places like this exist? Velna shook her head. Most forgotten. My people left after war. Jack helped her to her feet. But you remembered. She nodded. My mother told me stories. I never knew if real. Jack smiled. She saved you. Even now. That night, they stayed in the sanctuary. Jack bathed in the warm spring and dressed his wound with clean bandages found in the old storage unit. Rael laughed for the first time in days, playing with little glowing bugs that danced around his head. Velna watched Jack quietly as he fixed a broken light using his human tools. She had never seen someone mix alien and human technology like that. Jack caught her staring. She looked away quickly, but Jack smiled. "I think this place was waiting for you to return." Velna shook her head softly. "No, it was waiting for us." Later, as the lights dimmed for night, Velna came to sit beside Jack. Rael was asleep in the bed of vines. Jack leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You should sleep." He said softly. Velna looked at him, her face gentle. "I can't stop thinking," she whispered. "Why did you help us?" Jack paused. He didn't answer for a while, then he said, "I saw a child in the snow. He looked scared, cold, alone." He looked into her eyes. "I couldn't walk away." Velna nodded slowly. "No human ever chose us before." Jack smiled. "Maybe it's time someone did." She reached out and took his hand, hesitant at first, then firm. Her fingers were thinner, colder, but they held warmth he didn't expect. A silent bond was made, not just between species, but between souls. Outside, the ice covered the land, but beneath the earth, in the forgotten sanctuary, hope had bloomed again. The cold world above had gone, quiet, but below, in the hidden sanctuary beneath the earth, life had returned. Rael laughed in his sleep, holding the red and gold bird Jack had given him. Velna sat beside her child, brushing his soft hair with her fingers. Her eyes were calm now. No more shaking hands, no more silent fear. Jack stood near the control panel, studying the strange alien systems glowing softly on the walls. Even though he didn't know their language, he could tell. The sanctuary had more than just warmth. It had a future. Behind him, Velna's voice broke the silence. "Storm is over." Jack turned to her. "Yes, I'll take you to the main outpost tomorrow. It's not far." Velna looked down. Her voice became soft. "What will happen to us there?" Jack knew the answer wasn't simple. Corbin and the others had returned to the human outpost earlier that morning. They had seen Velna and Rael fight beside Jack, but they didn't trust aliens. Not yet. "I don't know," Jack admitted, "but I'll be with you." Velna looked at him, searching his face. "You protect us?" Jack stepped forward and knelt in front of her. "I didn't just save your child in the storm," he said gently. "I made a promise to myself that I won't let this galaxy turn me cold. I'll protect you, both of you, as long as I'm alive." Velna's breath caught. Her eyes filled with tears. No words came. She reached out and took Jack's hand. She didn't just feel safe now. She felt loved. The next morning, the three of them stood at the mouth of the cave. The world outside had changed. The sun reflected off endless white snow. The sky was clear and pale blue. The air was still cold but not cruel. Rael held Jack's hand tightly. The child wore a small coat, stitched together from materials in the sanctuary. Velna wore a warm cloak made from vines and fur. Her hair blew softly in the wind. They stepped out together, slowly, carefully, and as they walked down the path, a drone flew overhead. It scanned them, paused, then flew back toward the human base. Jack knew what that meant. They were expected. At the gates of the human outpost, guards stood ready. Corbin met them at the edge of the snow. He looked at Jack, then at Velna and Rael. Jack stood tall. "They're with me." Corbin didn't speak. Behind him, some humans looked afraid, others curious. And then, Rael stepped forward. He looked up at Corbin and offered him the little red and gold bird. Corbin stared at the toy, then knelt down, slowly, and took it. Rael smiled. Velna stepped behind her son, placing a hand on his shoulder. and Corbin nodded. "I'll tell the others," he said. "They stay." Jack exhaled. It wasn't full trust, but it was a start. Weeks passed. Velna and Rael lived inside the outpost, at Jack's side. She began helping in the med bay. Her herbal knowledge saved a worker from frostbite. People started talking to her. Slowly. Carefully. Rael played with the children. He taught them how to hum alien songs. He learned to say thank you in English. And one day, Velna sat beside Jack under the stars, their backs against a snowy wall. Rael slept in a tent nearby. She looked at Jack, her eyes full of something warm. Before storm, she whispered, "I thought all humans were cruel." Jack turned to her, smiling. "What do you think now?" She smiled back. "I think only Storm was cruel." Jack chuckled. "Then we survived the worst part." Velna leaned her head on his shoulder. "You didn't just save us," she said softly. "You showed me something I never knew before." "What's that?" She looked at the stars above. "Compassion." That night, inside a small tent warmed by love, Rael whispered in his sleep, "Jack." Jack turned to Velna. She nodded. "He calls you that now. Like father." Jack's eyes burned with tears. He held her hand, and in that frozen world where fear once ruled, a new family had formed, not by blood, but by bravery, compassion, and choice. It meant, "You are family now."